Rain tapped gently against the window of the small provincial coffee shop, the kind of rhythmic lull that usually calms the mind, but not Max Lorenz. His right leg bounced under the table with barely contained energy, his hand clutching a black pen that danced erratically across the thin white napkin in front of him. A rough sketch of a phoenix wrapped around bold capital letters was beginning to take shape. The logo of a company that didn't exist yet. It wasn't much, just ink and hope, but to Max it was everything. Across the table, stirring her cappuccino with disinterest, sat Emily Carter, poised, polished, and practically gleaming in her gold-accented wristwatch and pastel designer coat. She didn't even look at the drawing when she spoke. "You seriously think you're going to be a billionaire, Max?" Her voice was coated with sugar, but her eyes were daggers. "Come on. You're 25, living in your childhood bedroom and playing businessman with napkins." Max didn't look up, he just kept sketching. The silence stretched for a moment too long. Emily chuckled under her breath, shaking her head. "God, it's almost cute. Dreamers like you crash harder than anyone else." She took one last sip, then slid her chair back with a sharp screech against the tile. "Wake up, Max. The world doesn't hand people like you empires. It hands you bills." She stood up, smoothed her coat, and without waiting for a response, added, "And no offense, but I'd rather date someone who already has an empire, not someone drawing one in crayon." Max watched as she walked out, her heels clicking with finality. The bell above the cafe door jingled, a sound that would haunt him later, a little metallic chime of failure. He stared at the half-finished logo, her words echoed, mixing with the hiss of the espresso machine, the rain, the quiet humiliation. But then, a slow breath, a shift in posture. His fingers clenched the napkin tighter, not to throw it away, but to preserve it. That logo would be real one day. He folded the napkin carefully, slipped it into his wallet like a vow, and stood up. The coffee sat cold on the table. He didn't even glance at it. Outside, the rain had picked up. His jacket was thin and the wind sharp, but Max barely noticed. His jaw was tight, his eyes steady. In that moment, Emily hadn't broken him. She had activated him. Max had never believed in fairy tales, but he had always believed in possibility, in the idea that something extraordinary could grow from nothing if only someone refused to give up. That belief had carried him through sleepless nights and empty bank accounts. But nothing had prepared him for the sting of her laugh, sharp, clean, surgical. 2 days later, he still heard it in his sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the same napkin now pinned to the cracked corkboard above his desk. The phoenix stared back defiantly. Max clenched his fists. Every time he thought about her smile as she walked away, that condescending tone, it lit something inside him. She didn't just say no, she dismissed him. She didn't break his heart, she mocked it. But the pain didn't paralyze him. It sobered him. That same night, he did something uncharacteristic. He made a list. In a battered notebook with half its pages already filled with sketches and notes from a dozen abandoned ideas, he wrote in capital letters, "Non-negotiables." Launched the company in under 18 months. Live off minimal funds, no distractions. Work harder than every single person I know. Never ask for validation, earn it. Never forget that moment in the cafe. Each item wasn't just a goal, it was a scar he promised to grow from. Max dropped out of the local comfort zone that had kept him soft. He took up a part-time night shift at a logistics warehouse, manual, thankless, but it paid just enough to scrape by. By day, he buried himself in books on finance, branding, product development. He downloaded free startup courses, watched pitch competitions, analyzed what made ideas stick and what made them sink. No more dreaming, now it was engineering, strategy, obsession. Still, progress wasn't linear. His first pitch deck was torn apart by an angel investor who didn't even make it past slide 3. The second ended in a polite nod and a curt rejection email. He started drinking black coffee and writing cold emails at 4 a.m., pitching ideas to people who never responded. One day, he couldn't afford the bus fare and walked 5 miles through rain to a co-working event where nobody spoke to him. He left soaked, alone, and furious, not at the world, but at how much more he'd have to do. And yet, each humiliation was strangely addictive. Every door slammed in his face made him more efficient, more focused. One investor, a gruff ex-founder named Ravi Malhotra, finally gave him a piece of advice. Instead of a dismissal, "Kid, your idea's good, your story's better, but what you need is proof. Get someone to believe in the numbers, not just in you." Max nodded. It wasn't praise, it was homework. So he stopped pitching dreams. He built prototypes. He tested markets. He got feedback, real feedback, not the empty kind from friends, but the brutal kind from strangers who didn't owe him anything. And slowly, things began to click. He found an online mentor in Boston who agreed to give him 30 minutes every Friday if Max proved progress. Max treated those 30 minutes like sacred time, preparing all week just to earn the next call. The days blurred into nights, the rejection emails piled up, and his bank account danced with zero, but something had shifted. This wasn't about Emily anymore, not really. She had lit the fuse, but now the fire had a life of its own. And Max? Max was no longer waiting to be believed in. He was becoming undeniable. There was no exact moment when it all clicked. No single door swinging open with a grand "Welcome to success" sign. It happened in whispers, a reply here, a nod there, a second meeting where there used to be silence. Max didn't notice it at first. He was too consumed by the grind. Months passed. His eyes had grown permanently tired, his jaw tighter, his hands calloused from manual labor and constant typing. He'd gone all in, no fallback plan, no safety net, just sheer, exhausted determination. Then, one cold January morning, he received an email. The subject line read, "Let's talk about Apex." He blinked. Apex, the name of his startup, the one he had scribbled onto that napkin. The Phoenix, the concept that had grown into an app-based logistics platform optimizing delivery chains for small e-commerce vendors, boring to most, but revolutionary for those stuck with bloated systems. The email came from a mid-tier VC firm in Chicago. They had seen his prototype demo on a niche forum he'd posted to at 2 a.m. 3 weeks prior. No likes, no comments. He'd almost deleted it in frustration. The meeting was scheduled for 11 a.m. the next day. Max showed up early, not in person, of course, just a Zoom call, but he wore a suit anyway, a cheap one rented, slightly loose at the shoulders. Still, it made him sit straighter. "Walk us through your numbers," one of the partners said. And Max did, calmly, clearly. He didn't sell them a dream, he sold them metrics, test groups, conversion rates, retention strategies. His pitch wasn't flashy, it was prepared. By the end, the lead partner leaned back and said, "It's rough, but it's real. Let's start small. Seed funding, $75K. Max didn't speak for a few seconds. $75,000. It was more than just capital, it was a crack of sunlight through a door he'd been pounding on for 2 years. "Deal," he said, voice steady. Inside, he was roaring. With money came leverage. He hired 2 part-time developers, one in Poland, the other in Manila, and built out the back end. His prototype became a product. Clients started to trickle in, then multiply. Word spread. Apex was faster, leaner, more responsive than the existing tools. Max wasn't selling ambition anymore. He was delivering results. And results make noise. A mid-level tech journalist picked up his story. A founder from nowhere, building something valuable without any Ivy League polish or big-name backing. The article made it onto the front page of Hacker News. From there, traffic exploded. Max got his first feature in Fast Company, then Tech Radar, then came the call from Forbes Under 30. He almost didn't answer it, thought it was a prank. But it wasn't. Max Lahrens, the kid with nothing but a napkin and a vengeance, was about to be profiled alongside founders who once felt galaxies away. The morning the Forbes issue dropped, Max stood in the center of his new office, minimalist, high-ceilinged, full of glass and light. It smelled of fresh paint and ambition. His team, now 8 full-time and growing, buzzed with excitement. On his desk sat the magazine. There he was on the cover, not smiling, just looking forward, sharp-suited, focused. The headline read, "The Quiet Rise of a Relentless Mind." He didn't like the photo. It felt a little too dramatic. But he kept staring at it anyway. Then his assistant stepped into the room. "Max, you've got a visitor." He raised an eyebrow. He wasn't expecting anyone. She didn't give her full name, just Emily. A pause. Max felt his stomach tighten, not in fear, not in longing, just recognition, a ghost returning. He straightened his cuffs and walked into the reception area. She was exactly as he remembered her, maybe a little more tired around the eyes, a little more careful in her posture, but still elegant, still sharp. "Hi," she said softly. "I saw the cover." Max gave a nod. He didn't invite her in. Not yet. "You've changed," she added, voice almost apologetic. "No," he said calmly, "I just got louder." She offered a half laugh, the kind people give when they aren't sure if they're allowed to be part of the joke. "I guess I didn't see it back then," she continued, "what you were building." "You didn't want him." Silence. "I made a mistake," she admitted, eyes downcast now. "You really did it, Max. I wanted to say I'm proud of you." He looked at her for a long moment. There were 1,000 things he could say, but only one felt necessary. "I didn't do it for you, Emily." Then he turned and walked back toward the conference room where his team was waiting. And Emily, the woman who once laughed at a dream on a napkin, stood quietly in the reception lobby of a company built on the very lines she called a joke. The hall was glass and gold, a space designed to impress, to gleam. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened onto a panoramic view of the skyline. Tall potted palms stood like silent sentinels, and the lighting was warm, flattering, intentional, the kind of lighting that made cameras love you. Max stood near the center of the atrium, dressed in a tailored black suit with subtle charcoal pinstripes. No tie, just a crisp, open white collar. Understated, powerful. Every detail of the evening had been orchestrated, the music, the lighting, the color of the champagne bottles. This was his night, the official launch of Apex HQ. Invitations had gone out weeks ago to investors, clients, the media, and, almost as an afterthought, a handful of people from his past, no one he really cared to see, except one. Emily Carter had RSVP'd the day after his Forbes cover dropped. She had marked it as +0. Max wasn't surprised. She'd never liked sharing the spotlight. As guests began to arrive, the room buzzed with industry chatter, flashes from camera phones, the clinking of glasses, the Apex logo, the final polished version of that napkin sketch glowed against a sleek onyx backdrop near the entrance. Just beneath it, in a shadow box of glass and gold, sat the napkin itself, framed, untouched, preserved like a relic. People paused to look. Some smiled, others asked. Max simply said, "That's where it all started." As the evening unfolded, Max worked the room like a seasoned diplomat, warm, confident, never lingering too long in one conversation. Everyone wanted a moment. Everyone wanted to be remembered. The energy was electric, but he felt oddly calm. Then, as he stepped away from a brief interview with a tech reporter, he saw her. Emily. She stood at the far end of the room, near the edge of the skyline windows, a glass of champagne in hand. She wore a cream-colored dress, elegant and modest, her hair in soft waves. Alone. Always. Alone. He didn't walk toward her. He didn't need to. Instead, he moved to the small stage near the logo wall. A string quartet had just finished playing. The soft murmur of conversation dipped as Max stepped up, adjusted the microphone, and offered a polite smile. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "When I started Apex, it was, well, let's just say, it was scribbled on a napkin in a coffee shop." Laughed. He nodded to the display case beside him. "That napkin is right there. I kept it, not because I thought I'd succeed, but because I needed to remember why I had to." His voice stayed even, steady. He didn't look at her, but he knew she was listening. I was told the dream was funny, that I was unrealistic, that this would never work. The room grew still, waiting. Max smiled slightly. And honestly, that was the best thing anyone ever said to me. More laughter, louder now, but with a tinge of admiration. He paused, letting the moment breathe. Tonight isn't about proving anyone wrong, it's about proving one thing right. That belief, backed by action, can rebuild an entire life. Applause. He raised his glass. To the builders, to the doubters, and to the version of you that keeps going, especially when no one claps. The glasses clinked, the music resumed. Max stepped down, and for a brief moment he met her eyes across the room. Emily stood frozen, her glass untouched. 1,000 emotions flickered in her face: surprise, pride, regret, and something deeper, a hollow ache of realization. She began to walk toward him. He turned before she could reach him and walked away. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. There was nothing more to say. She had been his catalyst, but this world, this empire, this moment, it was his. And it was far bigger than any apology she could offer. As the celebration swelled around him, a familiar melody drifted through the speakers. Her favorite song. It played like a whisper from the past, ironic and perfect. Max looked out over the city skyline, eyes catching the reflection of the logo in the glass. Behind him, people celebrated. Behind him, Emily stood still. He didn't turn around. Yeah, he didn't need to. The party faded as the night deepened. Guests slowly filtered out into the cool hum of the city, their laughter trailing into the darkness like sparks from a fireworks show. Dazzling but fleeting. The echo of clinking glasses was gone now, replaced by silence. Max stood alone in his office, high above the world he had once been told he'd never reach. The city below sprawled in a sea of lights, endless and electric. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the buildings glittered like ambitions made solid. Cold steel, warm yellow windows, a rhythm of silent stories unfolding floor by floor. And now, his story stood among them. He poured himself a glass of champagne, not because he craved the drink, he barely tasted it, but because the moment demanded a symbol. It was a kind of ritual, a seal. He turned toward the framed napkin on his wall. The phoenix looked different now. Still the same sketch, the same ink lines, but it no longer represented the thing he wanted. It represented everything he survived. Max traced the edge of the frame with his fingers, as if grounding himself in the reminder. This empire wasn't built from revenge. It was born from refusal. The refusal to let someone else define his worth, to let a moment of humiliation become his ending. He walked over to the wide balcony, pushed open the sliding door, and stepped into the night air. The wind lifted the edges of his blazer, as if trying to carry him upward. Below, the city breathed. Somewhere in that vast grid of lights, Emily was probably sitting in a car, processing everything she had just seen. Maybe staring at her hands, maybe crying, or maybe doing nothing at all, stunned into silence by the weight of what she had once laughed at and lost. But Max didn't feel anger, not anymore. He felt something softer, pity, perhaps, or maybe closure, because all of this wasn't about her, not anymore. She had been the push, the ignition, but Max had done the driving. Every sleepless night, every rejection, every failure, every spark of progress, that had been him. Alone, awake, at war with his own doubt. He lifted the champagne glass to the sky, not to toast her, not even to toast himself, but to toast the moment, the exact breath where the past, the pain, the hunger for validation, all finally went quiet. He spoke aloud, barely above a whisper. I made it. There was no one there to hear it. And that was the beauty of it. He didn't need a crowd, because he didn't need her gaze, her approval, or even her apology. The only person who had to believe it was already standing there in the wind, with a city at his feet and a future in his hands. He took one last sip, then set the glass down on the railing. The music from downstairs faded, the lights in the office dimmed, and Max Lorenz, once a boy with a dream and a napkin, turned and walked back inside. No fireworks, no fanfare. Just a man who had finally, quietly won